What's up, everybody, and welcome to Catholic Girl on the Radio. I'm Rita Sekali, and this is the show that tells you all about the early church fathers' writings and brings them to modern day English. Today, my friends, we are going to go through Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. The Gospel of Matthew tells us, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him." When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together. He demanded of them where Christ would be born. And they said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophets, And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of you shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel." Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you found him, bring word again, that I may come and worship him also." When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over the young child, where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they came into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned by God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ. My friends, today we are going to start off with a lengthy commentary from St. John Chrysostom, so let's get to it. We're also going to end with St. John Chrysostom as well, but hey, let's do this. All right, and he says, "We need to be fully awake, vigilant, and prayerful to understand the meaning of this passage and to discern how these wise men were, or how these wise men were, where they came from, and why they came. What led them to make this journey? And what was the nature of the star that guided them?" Before we delve into these questions, let's first consider the arguments that the opponents of the truth make. The devil, in his cunning ways, has influenced them to misinterpret this event and use it as a weapon against the truth. And I'm guessing he's talking about the people who are looking at this event and looking at it from a different perspective, not necessarily a different perspective, but to use it for things that are negative. So anyways, so St. John continues, and he says, what do they say? Look, they argue a star appeared at Christ's birth proves that astrology is reliable. We know that astrology is not reliable. But if Jesus' birth followed astrological signs, why did he later denounce astrology, silence the demons, and expose false beliefs, and condemn sorcery? What's more, how did the wise men know from the star alone that he was the King of the Jews? After all, Jesus himself declared to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." He didn't exhibit any outward signs of earthly royalty. No guards with spears, no horses, or royal chariots. He led a humble, simple life surrounded by 12 lowly followers. That is a very cool point. And I want to put this in a little bit of perspective because I kind of got lost in the middle, but I want to say that he's looking at the people who are saying, okay, well, astrology is something great, or this is that he used the stars to guide them. But then Jesus goes back and he denounces these things, and he casts out demons, and he silences the devil, and he's doing all this stuff. And so St. John then asks, was that enough? Was the star enough that led them to say that he is the king of the Jews? What about the star that was so different? If there was nothing indicating that this is the king of the Jews, because in their mind, they went to Pilate, right? They went to the palace, but that's not where he was. So there has to be something more. So he says, even if the wise men somehow knew that he was a king, why did they come such a long way to honor him? That's very interesting too. Why would they take that journey? Astrology, as they practiced it, is about predicting someone's future based on their birth time, not identifying someone's birth without being present at the event. The wise men weren't at Jesus' birth. They didn't calculate his future based on astrological signs. Instead, they saw a star in their homeland long before and set out to find the child. That raises another question. Why would they undergo such a long journey to worship a king from another nation? Did they not have kings of their own? Did they not have their own royalties? What was going on with these people that they're like, oh yeah, let's put our caravans together and journey on to worship this foreign king? And so the saint continues and he says, if he were their own king, their devotion would seem unusual. But he wasn't. He was a king from a faraway land. So if Jesus had been born in a palace surrounded by royal glory and powerful father, we might understand their visit as an effort to earn royal favor. But he wasn't. He was born into poverty, and yet they bought gift and worshipped him. Why would they risk danger by publicly declaring another king in a city ruled by Herod, knowing that they could be sentenced to death for such an action? And why did they worship a mere baby in swaddling cloth? If Jesus had been a grown man, they may have hoped for a future reward from him. But worshiping a helpless infant to a poor mother, it defies reason. It doesn't make sense. How could they expect a baby to remember their tribute or repay their devotion? If his brother was meant to remind him later, that still wouldn't justify their actions. It would have only made Jesus a target, as Herod's reaction demonstrated. So announcing the birth of a future king into an existing ruler often leads to hostility and violence. When we examine this event from a human perspective, it really does feel like it's full of contradictions. But instead of confusing ourselves with endless questions, let's go back and focus on the star itself. Understanding the nature will probably clarify a lot of the things that we need to know. Okay, so here our saint begins to talk about the nature of the star. And this, again, is St. John Chrysostom. He says, okay, was the star an ordinary celestial body or something extraordinary? He says, I believe it wasn't a typical star at all, but a divine sign. First, consider its movements. Unlike natural stars, which move from the east to the west, the star traveled from north to south, guiding the wise men from Persia to Palestine. Second, consider the time of day. It appeared in broad daylight, outshining the sun, a feat impossible for any natural star or even the moon. Now, I'm reading this stuff from the saint, and I have truthfully never looked into these things, but I think they're worth looking into. It was never something that I thought of or considered looking into what is the nature of this particular star, or how do we study it nowadays, or what do we call it now with the current technology that we have, or the movements of the star, or anything like that. But the man has a point. So we continue. He says, third, it didn't remain in the sky, but led the wise men precisely to the house where Jesus was. No star, no matter how bright, could pinpoint such a specific location from such a height. The star behaved more like a rational being than a celestial object, guiding them when needed and disappearing when they reached Jerusalem. Seems like he's saying that this is more of an angelic being than anything else. So then he asks, why did it disappear when they arrived in Jerusalem? Well, his answer is because the wise men needed to speak to Herod to fulfill God's plan. Because there are things that are set in motion, right? I know the plans I have for you. There are prophecies that need to be fulfilled. Okay, so they had to speak to Herod because Herod's reaction was also there, was also accounted for. Did it grieve God? Absolutely. But it was accounted for because God can see it. He allows for things to happen because we have freedom, but he does see it beforehand. So he continues, he says, when they left Herod, the star reappeared, resuming its guidance. It even stopped directly above the place where Jesus was. What a supernatural occurrence. This star, I believe, or this is what his saint says, was more like a pillar of cloud that led the Israelites into the wilderness, moving and stopping as necessary. So now we're going to look at the purpose of the star with our saint. And he says, why did God use a star? To rebuke the Jews of their blindness and to leave them without excuse. Despite all the prophecies about the Messiah coming, they remained indifferent. But foreigners, guided by a star, came to worship him. Just as Jonah's message caused the Ninevites to repent, and the Queen of Sheba traveled far to hear Solomon's wisdom, these wise men responded to God's sign while the Jews ignored him. Some may ask, why use a star to draw them? How else could God have done it? Sending prophets wouldn't have worked, as wise men did follow the Jewish scriptures. A heavenly voice? They may have dismissed it. An angel? They likely wouldn't have believed. Instead, God used a familiar medium, a star, to catch their attention. Oh, this is so relevant because he uses that with us today. A lot of times I hear someone say, well, I want God to show me a sign that is outside of the norm, outside of the typical things. But God chooses to use another medium, something familiar to you, something that would catch your attention but not deter you, something that you couldn't shrug off, something that is seen on a day-to-day basis. Its unusual brightness, we can go back to saying, he says, its unusual brightness and movement astonished them and led them to Bethlehem. Similarly, Paul quoted pagan poets to engage the Greek, and God used sacrifice to teach the Israelites, meeting people where they were to draw them closer. It's such a profound thing because this is exactly what God does for you and me. He is not beyond using whatever is around you to bring you to him. He created it to begin with. Everything that came in existence because of him. And so he uses that to get to you, to draw you closer. We continue with the saint, and our saint says, notice how their faith grew. And this is in regards to wise men's growth in faith. It says, notice how their faith grew. At first they followed the star, but when they reached Bethlehem, God spoke to them through an angel. Just as the Philistines learned to respect the Ark of the Covenant through signs, the wise men were drawn closer to God through these progressive revelations. God's condescension, meeting them at their level, wasn't unworthy of him. It was an act of love, leading them step by step to a deeper understanding. I really hope that that's the case for us as well. It was an act of absolute love when Christ emptied himself, when God emptied himself and took on the form of man. Why would he get rid of all his tools and take on a human body like mine? Why? Why would anybody in their right mind leave the glory and come look like me if it wasn't an act of love? There's no other way to describe it. There's no other way for it to make sense. But yet oftentimes this love that he has extended towards us is so profound, and it's so profound from his side, but it is not met with the same love. It's not. And it's, I don't know what the words are, to be honest. Because it's not met with love. It's met with something. Not sure what that something is. But I don't think we have comprehended what he did and what it means. Because if we had comprehended what it is, what he did, and what that actually means, we certainly would not behave the way we would behave. We would certainly have a deeper understanding. And so the scene continues and he says, well, the star wasn't just a cosmic event. It was a divine message. God used it to call the Gentiles to shame the belief of the Jews, to demonstrate his power in an unexpected way. The wise men journeyed reminded us that God can use even the simplest means to accomplish his purpose. Their story is a lesson in humility, in faith, and an unfolding revelation of God's plan to save the world. Now we're going to take a look at commentary from St. Augustine, and I believe we have another saint, which is St. Gregory, the dialogist as well. And he says, and this is St. Augustine, and so he says that after the miraculous birth from a virgin, a God-man came forth by divine power from a virgin's womb. He laid in a humble shelter of a stable, wrapped in poor cloth, a child containing infinite majesty in a small human body. Suddenly, a new star appeared in the sky, shining down on the earth and dispelling the world's darkness. It turned night into day, so that the brilliance of the day star, the symbol of Christ, would not be obscured by the night. This is why the gospel says, now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This extraordinary event was not revealed to the learned or the righteous. It was revealed to the shepherds, simple, uneducated people, and to the Magi, who had lived among idol worshippers. Yet both were drawn to the cornerstone, Christ himself. He came to choose the weak and the foolish of the world, to shame the powerful and the wise. He did not call the righteous, but sinners, so that the great might not become prideful and the lowly might not despair. Oh, you guys, I read this and I can't help but pray and think and hope that I am just like the shepherds. I am just like the uneducated or the unlearned that somehow found Christ and found a wealth of information. Now, I could tell you that I have my fair share of college degrees, right? In the terms of the world, I am very highly educated on a personal level, but to me, I am foolish. But I fell in love with Christ. I am the simple. But again, I fell in love with Christ, and my prayer is that you and I continue to be there, because that's the best place to be. pride it taints us in every possible way. And no matter where or how I go, I will never be worthy of him. But again, it's an act of love. It's an act of love. So our St. Augustine continues, and he says, many kings of Judea have been born and died, but did any Magi come to honor them? No, because those kings were not heavenly testimony. But this king was different. The Magi were taught that in worshiping the child, they would receive the salvation of God. Jesus was not the kind of king that attracted people through display of power. He had no royal robes, no crowns of jewels, no royal possession, no army, no reputation of victories. Instead, he laid in a manger, a newborn child of humble size and of great poverty. And yet, hidden in the small infant was something immeasurably great. These Magi, representing the first believers among the Gentiles, did not learn from the human sources, but from divine revelation, as the Gospel records. We saw his star in the east. The Magi saw the star, believed, and asked to see him, showing the kind of faith that both seeks and trusts. They represent those who walk by faith, hoping for what they do not see. That's us, you guys. That is us, and he is absolutely incredible. And so we continue, and he says, some people claim that fate, meaning the arrangement of the stars at a person's birth or conception, control a person's life, independent of God's will. St. Augustine says this belief should be rejected by anyone who asks or seeks to worship the true God. Some suggest that the stars have been given power by God to influence events, but this view wrongly assumes that the heavens control human actions. If humans blamed their sins on the stars, it would be absurd as blaming the laws for crimes. No just society would accept that. No one would say, well, the law was there and that's what caused me to sin, or that's what caused me to commit a crime. If we deny the power of the stars over ordinary humans, how much more should we deny that they had any power over the birth of Christ, who is the eternal creator and ruler of all things? The star that appeared at Jesus' birth was not an ordinary star that followed the natural law set at creation. It was a unique sign, appearing specifically for the Magi and guiding them to Christ by moving ahead of them until it stops in his location. If this star had been an ordinary part of heaven, it would not have suddenly changed its course or determined Christ's actions. Instead, Christ commanded the star. It served him, not the other way around. If we insist on connecting this event to fate, it would be understood that Christ controlled the fate of the star, not the other way around. I see this, and all I could think of is our lives as well, and how it is him that commands the events in our lives, or he rather uses them or has authority over them for them to work together for our benefit, even when we are so extremely disobedient. Yet he can do that. And we find him doing that all the time. We find him doing that as we progress in life, as we progress through events and we find our way back to him. He may not be using a star the same way he used it with the Magi, but he is using different stars in our lives to bring us back to the precise location where we would meet him. The question is, I suppose, are you ready? Are you ready to follow, to trust, to go the distance, to keep putting in the effort? Because it took the Magi a very long time. It took a lot of effort. It was long, cold nights, maybe. It was a hard journey. It was a whole massive amount of things. But they persevered because that star was more important than any of it. And so we continue, and it says the star that appeared at Jesus' birth, again, was not ordinary. This is what we just read. But he says, how did the Magi know that the star signified Christ's birth? Some believe that they didn't receive knowledge that they received knowledge through an angelic message or some other divine revelations. Did it come from good or evil angels? Even the demons, the wicked, acknowledge Christ as the Son of God. So they may have feared his coming. But it is more reasonable to believe that a good angel revealed this message, urging the Magi to worship Christ for their salvation rather than condemnation. The angels may have told them, the star you have seen points to Christ. Go and worship him where he has been born, and witness how great it was that he came into the world. So those are just additional signs, additional things that they propose, I guess, as well. All right, my friends, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you have any questions or you simply just want to connect with me, you can find me at The Word with Rita, and I will be with you in the next episode. Bye for now.